Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel, and today we got some interesting news surrounding Call of Duty 2025, and that news is not good. In fact, a lot of you probably aren't going to like it, and you'll probably be left scratching your head just baffled as to why Activision does the things that they do, but hey, that's pretty much been the state of the COD franchise for the past couple of years or so. So recently, we got some information coming in from a playtester of the new Call of Duty game, and that information was covered by Tom Henderson, and I of course did a video on that, which you guys can find here, but in there, we learned a lot about multiplayer, zombies, as well as campaign, and specifically the campaign is going to be set in open world Avalon, which you guys know as the cut Warzone map here from Black Ops 6, and today Ghost of Hope took to Twitter to let us know all about how that is shaping up. Here we see from Ghost, hearing the COD 2025's campaign is fucking terrible, to which I respond, more of that open world nonsense, and he says it sounds worse than Modern Warfare 3's version of open world. He then goes on to say that the campaign is literally all just the Avalon Warzone map, and he doesn't think Raven Software has anything to do with it, as most of the campaign team left right before Black Ops 6 came out. Well, given all this information from his sources, which Ghost is about as reliable as it comes, it seems like COD 2025 is not shaping up so well. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, it's just a campaign, it's not that big of a deal, but if they're really this out of touch with the community when it comes to the campaign, just imagine the outlandish shit they're going to be doing in multiplayer and zombies. And when it comes to the idea of an open world campaign, the idea was almost universally hated. Like, the mechanics in Modern Warfare 3 were just so freaking bad. Like, sometimes you would literally be parachuting into the map, you had armor, which you had to keep refilling, you could find weapons inside of loot boxes, you had a weapon loadout for crying out loud, there was a tac map, you'd have to find ammo caches around the map, there'd be these big circles on your mini-map that would just imply the side mission was there. Like, basically, they Warzone-ified the entire Call of Duty campaign, and when they went into this, the spin they put on it for fans was it was going to allow more freedom, more exploration, you could craft your own narrative in your head about how the events went down by the choices that you made out in the open world, but the reality was the missions felt hollow, they were confusing, people were getting lost, and everybody felt betrayed that their Call of Duty campaign, which has historically always been one of the few things about the series that hasn't been completely warped by Activision, was now basically just a reskin of Warzone. The Modern Warfare 3 campaign was bashed by players and critics alike, and rightly so. Like, the entire idea of switching up the on-rails linear Call of Duty campaign experience was a dumb idea in the first place. People know what to expect from COD campaigns, and that's why they like them. They're usually 4 to 6 hours long. You essentially just play through an action movie and you see what happens to the world and to the characters. It's always been good. It's a time-tested formula. Why mess with that formula? Instead of putting time, money, effort, and resources into making a proper campaign, however, they decided, with how rushed Modern Warfare 3 was, to just scrap together Urzikstan locations from Warzone, script a few triggers and sequences together, and basically call that the story mode. It was such a stupid idea, and recently from that playtester we learned that the COD 2025 campaign is also going to have those open world elements, this time being set on the cut Avalon Warzone map, so essentially 8 months before the game even comes out, it's already doomed to fail, at least when it comes from the campaign perspective. There is something to be said about them learning their lesson from their previous attempt at an open world campaign, but the very concept itself is the thing that fans don't want, so regardless of how much they polish it up or whatever, people still aren't going to be happy. And then you think of how this might translate into multiplayer and zombies. We learned from Tom Henderson via that playtesting leak that multiplayer is going to have some form of wall running in it. Most, if not all, of the multiplayer maps will be copy and pasted from the Black Ops 2 maps, with some of them being reimagined with a Japanese theme for some reason. They're apparently going to be bringing back the 32 on 32 ground war mode, which for me personally, I'm not a huge fan of. I would just much rather them focus solely on 6v6. They're apparently bringing back open world Outbreak style zombies as well, probably just to further capitalize on Avalon. And like, at that point, what is even the sense in making a game anymore? Like, just make a Warzone map and then use that map verbatim for the campaign, use its POIs for multiplayer maps, and then just turn around and use the same map for zombies. Like, where is the creativity here? Where is the art? Where is the soul? Where is the passion? It's one thing to handle things like they did back in the day, you know, back in the olden times, in the way long ago, they would create the COD campaign from scratch, and then they would section out levels from the campaign, fix them up, polish them up, balance them, and release them as multiplayer maps. Now, not every multiplayer map back in the day was inspired from the campaign, but a lot of them were, and it was an efficient way of connecting the world and bridging that gap between the narrative-focused campaign and the action-packed multiplayer. What they're doing now, however, is nothing like that. They literally are just creating one giant Warzone map and then using it for everything, even with the same freaking mechanics. Like, we've often talked about how Warzone caused this whole fundamental shift within the COD series, and it's never been more true, man. Like, it doesn't matter if we're talking about campaign, multiplayer, zombies, Zombies or Warzone, and all those modes we're parachuting in, we're grabbing armor plates, there's freaking chests with randomized and tiered loot in the story mode, for crying out loud. Everything is just Warzone now, and I'm so sick of it. Like, part of the fun back in the day used to be the variety that we had between the big modes, right? Campaign was slow and gritty and thematic, and it was focused on the narrative. Multiplayer was a completely different beast. Like, they would expand upon the locations of the campaign, but also they'd have a whole bunch of extra guns, and then on top of that, they'd have all the fun arcade mechanics along with the progression paths, prestige mode, actually facing other people. Like, multiplayer was a whole separate beast. And then you had zombies, right? And what fun zombies used to be, like the unique perks, the soda machines, the story that made no sense whatsoever, but nobody cared because it was a fun survival mode that felt like an entirely separate game. For years there, people were always saying that zombies should be its own separate game because it was that good and it was that deep and that interesting. And then you look at what we have now. We basically have Warzone. We then have Warzone with NPCs in the story mode. We have Warzone with respawns, hard points, and score limits. And then we have Warzone with zombies in it. Like, I can't be the only person who is so sick and tired of this style of game design. And recently we talked about it on a Dear Nero, but I think that severe lack of variety is one of the many things that is burning people out on this series. The amount of differences between the games year over year is getting smaller and smaller, and the variety gap between game modes is also narrowing down. Like, campaign is pretty similar now to multiplayer, which is also similar to zombies, which is also similar to Warzone. Like, they're homogenizing everything. And on the one hand, I can see why they do that. It makes things easier, it makes things cheaper, less people can do it, and you probably get more of a streamlined product that people can just more easily go from multiplayer into zombies, for example, or zombies into Warzone, for example, and still have those same mechanics that carry over. I can see why they may want to do it, but ultimately I think they're doing it because it's the cheapest, laziest way to get the game out and save as much money as possible while trying to turn as much profit as possible. Again, you make one giant Warzone map and then you use that for the campaign, all the POIs for multiplayer maps, you use it for zombies, and then of course you use it for Warzone. Like, oh boy, we just make one map and the entire game's done essentially, and that feels so bad considering how good Call of Duty used to be and how the campaign used to be fantastic. Then the multiplayer would kind of expand upon that, and then zombies was its own separate beast. And then even when Warzone came out, for crying out loud, Warzone itself felt like a whole different experience as well. When you bought a Call of Duty game back when, you were oftentimes getting a pretty solid story game, like nothing to the level of like a lot of other games out there, but COD campaigns were always solid enough, you know. Then you had the world-class multiplayer on top of that. You had zombies, which was like its own separate beast, its own separate game, and then after that, Warzone even having that full Battle Royale mode, you were essentially buying 4 games for the price of one, and it was fantastic. And now, it does not feel like that anymore, at least for me personally. And I know people talk about always like, you know, I'm not buying the next COD, I'll never buy the next COD. I'd even buy Black Ops 6, for crying out loud. I've had Game Pass for a while, and Black Ops 6 is on Game Pass. Like, I never even personally bought the game. I did play it a bunch, and of course I covered it here on the channel because I am a COD YouTuber, but when you look at the quality of the game that we have now for the price of the game, and mind you, they're talking about increasing the price up to $80, possibly $100 in the near future, just the sheer value you're getting for your money now is not nearly as high as it used to be, and that is one of the many reasons I believe people have been walking away from the series. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna wrap this video up here today. Just I wanted to cover the news that the campaign apparently is not doing so well because it's gonna be this giant open world Warzone nonsense, and somehow that turned into this entire commentary. So I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Leave your thoughts and feedback on today's news down there in the comments. Thank you all so much for listening and for your continued support of my channel, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful day.